For the first 30 seconds, imagine a timeline where Batman does not snap in a single explosive moment, but slowly, logically, almost reasonably loses control. A Gotham where every bad outcome feels justified at first, where every decision makes sense in isolation, and where the most terrifying part is realizing that nothing ever feels obviously wrong until it is far too late. Because this is not a story about Batman becoming evil overnight, it is about a Batman who becomes unstoppable, unquestionable, and frighteningly efficient. And by the end of this video, you will understand why this timeline is considered the darkest possible future for Gotham, and why no villain ever comes close to being as dangerous as a Batman who believes he is right. This timeline begins quietly, which is always how the worst timelines begin, with Batman facing an endless cycle of escapes, disasters, and rebuilt crimes, watching Gotham bleed slowly instead of dramatically, and deciding that control, not hope, is the only remaining variable he can still influence. There is no dramatic vow, no angry declaration, just a subtle shift in strategy where prevention becomes more important than reaction, and certainty becomes more valuable than mercy. Gotham barely notices at first, because crime rates drop, emergencies resolve faster, and villains vanish from the streets for longer stretches of time, and Gotham, as always, chooses results over questions. What makes this timeline oddly funny in a dark, uncomfortable way is how reasonable everything sounds when explained step by step, because Batman does not abandon his principles outright, he simply reinterprets them. He still protects the innocent, still avoids unnecessary casualties, still claims to value life. But he begins treating criminals less like people and more like problems that must be permanently managed. Gotham's underworld reacts with confusion, paranoia, and absurd overcorrections, criminals abandoning elaborate schemes, others surrendering immediately, and some spreading exaggerated myths about Batman's new methods, turning him into an almost supernatural figure whose judgment cannot be appealed. As Batman tightens his grip on Gotham, the city itself starts adapting around him. Police operations quietly align with his patterns. Politicians adjust their rhetoric, and citizens begin speaking about safety in terms of Batman's presence rather than justice or reform. The bat signal becomes less of a call for help and more of a warning sign that something is about to end decisively. This is where the timeline grows truly unsettling, because Gotham becomes calmer without becoming healthier, quieter without becoming safer in the long term, and Batman becomes the axis around which the city rotates. The intrigue deepens when Batman realizes that control is addictive precisely because it works. Because every time he intervenes earlier, plans more thoroughly, and removes variables more aggressively, Gotham improves statistically. This creates a dangerous feedback loop where success validates escalation, and escalation becomes policy. Batman starts trusting his own judgment more than systems, laws, or allies, not out of arrogance, but out of experience, because experience has taught him that hesitation costs lives. The terrifying part is that he is not wrong, and that is exactly why this timeline spirals. There is a strange, ironic humor in watching Gotham's villains try to adapt to a Batman who no longer plays psychological games, no longer waits for monologues, and no longer tolerates theatrics. Some villains attempt to reform out of fear rather than redemption, others retreat into obscurity, and a few embrace chaos completely, believing that if Batman controls everything, then unpredictability is the only remaining weapon. Gotham turns into a chessboard where every piece is reacting to a player who never misses a move. As Batman's control increases, his isolation deepens. Not because he pushes others away, but because no one can keep up with a man who has already calculated the outcome of every discussion before it begins. Allies sense that their role has shifted from partners to variables, useful but replaceable, trusted but monitored. Batman does not become cruel, he becomes distant, and distance makes resistance feel irrational. In this timeline, disagreement is not punished, it is simply rendered irrelevant. The most curious element of this terrifying timeline is how Gotham begins to prefer this version of Batman, because fear is predictable and predictability feels safe. Citizens sleep easier knowing that Batman is always watching, always planning, always intervening before things escalate. The city slowly trades freedom for stability without ever signing a contract, because the results feel immediate and the costs feel abstract. Gotham does not realize it is losing control of its own identity because Batman has taken that burden willingly. The darkness of this timeline reaches its peak when Batman realizes that the greatest threat to Gotham is no longer external chaos, but internal complacency. A city that relies on one man's constant control becomes fragile, dependent, and dangerously unprepared for a future without him. Batman understands this, but also understands that stepping back would undo years of progress, and so he stays. convincing himself that temporary control can still lead to long-term freedom, even as the evidence suggests otherwise. What makes this timeline truly terrifying is that Batman never loses control in a dramatic sense. He does not rage, he does not betray his mission, and he does not abandon his logic. He loses control by gaining too much of it, by becoming the solution to every problem, and by turning Gotham into a system optimized around his presence. Villains are no longer Gotham's greatest fear, uncertainty is, because uncertainty is the one thing Batman has eliminated. In the final phase of this timeline, Batman looks out over a Gotham that is quieter, safer, and eerily dependent, and realizes that the most dangerous moment was not when he took control, but when everyone else let go. This is not a future where Batman becomes a tyrant in name, but one where he becomes inevitable. And inevitability is far more frightening than villainy. Gotham survives, but it no longer chooses its own path, and Batman becomes the guardian not just of the city's safety, but of its direction. This is why this timeline stands as the most terrifying of all, because it is built on good intentions, rational decisions, and undeniable results. And it shows that the greatest danger Batman faces is not losing control through anger, but losing it through success. If you enjoyed this funny, curious, and deeply intriguing exploration of Batman's darkest possible timeline, make sure to subscribe for more twisted superhero stories. Comment below with your thoughts on whether this future is inevitable or avoidable, and share this video with fellow fans who love diving into the most unsettling corners of the DC universe.